Once, in a quiet village surrounded by mountains and forests, lived a young boy named Aram. His village was simple, filled with people who tended to their farms, raised their families, and never ventured far from home. Aram had always been curious and filled with dreams that extended beyond the mountains, but like many others around him, he often found himself doubting his abilities. The thought of failure kept him rooted where he was, and though he dreamed of becoming a skilled craftsman, the fear of not being good enough always held him back. One day, an old wanderer named Kyan arrived in the village. His clothing was patched from years of travel, his hair was wild, and his eyes held a wisdom that seemed as deep as the rivers and as old as the mountains themselves. People were curious about him, and he often shared tales of faraway lands and ancient practices. Aram was especially drawn to him, wondering if Kyan might have answers to the questions that troubled his heart. When Aram gathered enough courage, he approached Kyan, hoping to hear something that would quiet the doubts in his mind. Kyan listened patiently, his gaze steady as Aram described how he yearned to create, to craft, to make something beautiful, but felt unsure whether he could ever be good enough. Kyan remained silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Come walk with me tomorrow morning. There is something I wish to show you." At dawn, Aram met Kyan at the edge of the village. The two began their journey up a rugged path toward the mountains. The way was challenging, but Kyan walked as though he had walked it 1,000 times, moving steadily but without haste. As they climbed, Aram asked why they were headed into the mountains. Kyan simply replied, "You'll understand soon enough." After hours of hiking, they reached a plateau with a breathtaking view. The valley below was a patchwork of green and gold fields, dotted with tiny huts and winding rivers that glittered in the morning sun. The world seemed vast and open, full of possibilities that Aram had never seen from his village. Kyan motioned for him to sit, and as they rested, he began to share a story. He spoke of two brothers who had lived in a village much like Aram's many years ago. Both had once been talented artists, known for their skill and creativity. But as they grew older, they found that they were no longer progressing in their craft. One brother, named Rami, believed that talent was something one was simply born with. When he struggled, he thought it meant he had reached his limit, and after a time, he stopped trying altogether. The other brother, Zahir, believed that skills could be grown, and that every challenge was a chance to improve. Zahir continued to work, to practice, to fail, and to learn. While Rami had given up, Zahir grew into one of the finest artists in the land. Aram listened carefully, sensing that Kyan was telling the story for his sake. The tale felt simple, yet something about it resonated with him. Kyan turned to him and asked, "Aram, do you believe that your skills and intelligence are fixed, or do you believe that they can grow?" Aram hesitated, then replied honestly, "I don't know. I want to believe I can grow, but it's hard when I fail or make mistakes." Kyan smiled, as though he had expected this response. "Many people believe that failure is a sign of weakness or lack of ability," he said, "but often it is just a sign that we need to try differently or learn more." He explained that people tend to fall into two different mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Those with a fixed mindset, like Rami, believe that they have a certain amount of talent or intelligence, and once they reach their limit, they can go no further. People with a growth mindset, however, see every challenge as an opportunity. They believe that abilities can be developed through effort, perseverance, and learning. Aram listened, intrigued. Kyan continued, explaining that a growth mindset allows people to embrace challenges, persevere in the face of setbacks, and see effort as a path to mastery. He shared that those with a growth mindset do not fear failure because they understand it as part of the journey. They sat in silence for a while, letting the lessons sink in. Finally, Kyan stood up and walked a little further along the plateau, beckoning for Aram to follow. As they walked, they came upon a tree growing at the edge of a cliff. It was twisted and knotted, its bark scarred by storms and harsh weather. Yet it stood strong, its branches reaching toward the sky. Kyan touched the tree gently and said, "This tree has faced many storms, many hardships. It could have fallen, it could have stopped growing. But it adapted, it strengthened, and it grew. Every scar tells a story of its resilience, its ability to continue growing despite the difficulties it faced. Aram understood the metaphor immediately. The tree's growth had not been easy or straightforward. It had been shaped by struggle, but it had grown stronger because of it. Kian continued, "You, too, can grow and become stronger. Your failures are not the end, they are only moments of learning, points from which you can grow. If you choose to see yourself as someone who can improve, then each challenge you face will become a step on the path toward your goals." As they began their descent back to the village, Aram felt a newfound resolve building within him. Kian's story had planted a seed of belief in his heart, the belief that he could change, improve, and grow. Over the following weeks and months, Aram threw himself into his work. He practiced his craft every day, and whenever he made mistakes, he reminded himself of Kian's words. At first, progress was slow, but he noticed that each time he failed, he learned something new. His skills began to improve, and his confidence grew with them. Years passed, and Aram became known throughout the land as a master craftsman. People marveled at his skill and often asked how he had reached such a level. He always shared the same story, the story of Kian, the two brothers, and the ancient tree on the mountain. He explained that his success was not due to talent alone, but to a belief that he could grow, adapt, and learn from every challenge. Aram's journey inspired others to adopt a growth mindset as well, transforming his village into a place where people believed in the power of perseverance and self-improvement. The lessons that Kian had shared lived on through Aram and everyone he taught, changing lives for generations to come. And so, a simple lesson on the power of the mind became a legacy, shaping a community that believed in its ability to grow and flourish, just like the tree on the mountain.